Hey guys, welcome to the next iteration of our collective list of the top 60 albums of the 60s. First episode on my channel here. So thank you guys who subscribed and are continuing with the series. I got my good friend John Stanek on the other end here, and we're going to talk about some more albums from the 60s. And if you haven't watched the last episode, I'm going to put the link to that. It's going to be on his channel. So make sure to check that out if you haven't seen it already. So, John, tell me, how excited are you for this episode here?
I am extremely excited, man. This is overall a great list from 60 to 1. Every single thing on here is a classic, whether we agree or not on all of them, we'll see. But yeah, this next run from 50 to 41 is just great stuff, man. And yeah, like you mentioned, the last episode 60 to 51 was on my channel. We're doing every other episode on each other's channels to try and get you guys to subscribe to each of us and follow both channels, which you got to follow Nathaniel, man. He's the greatest.
Well, thank you for such kind words, John. I think very highly of your channel as well. So to hear that really makes me feel gratified. But yeah, I mean, without further ado, let's get right into it. At number 50, Giant Steps by John Coltrane. I mean, yeah, this is really I think a little bit too low on this list. This is one of the best jazz records of all time, and obviously Coltrane, one of the most legendary figures in jazz. And really, I think that I mean, he had great albums before, like Blue Train, but I think this is even better. Just that opening track alone, just that just he fits like 1,000 chord modulations into like one song. I'm probably pushing it. It's probably more like 500. But still, it is just absolutely nuts. He's just firing off on all cylinders on the sax, and it's just like really maybe the most technically proficient player in all of jazz. It's just you hear Coltrane solo, and you're like, how did this man even get a chance to breathe? It is just absolutely insane, and really an absolute jazz standard that song is. And of course, you have other great tunes on here like Cousin Mary, just another fantastic one. And I really, really love Countdown too, where it's just like it really feels very, sporadic, very momentous in just the way it builds. It is just unlike anything you hear in there. And of course, Spiral as well really sounds like it is spiraling, in these descending patterns from what I can remember. Just absolutely brilliant. But then I also just have to talk about real quick. I think one of the most beautiful pieces in modal jazz, and that's Nema. And really just, and I think this is when I listen to just on sitting in my room with the window open on a hot summer night, just letting this play. You can picture those city lights in the street, and just you hear this luscious, smooth ballad. I think it probably is, in my opinion, Coltrane's greatest composition. So moving, just so subtle, so beautiful. I really don't think that modal jazz gets better than that.
Yeah, man, absolutely. A definite classic. And I think, yeah, just like you said, one of the greatest jazz albums of all time. I actually like Blue Train a little more personally, but Giant Steps to me is a close second. And I think it's perfectly titled because coming right off the heels of Blue Train, that being in 59, this one being in 60, it felt like he did take giant steps, because it's like if someone was trying to just show off on their instrument, there's nothing better than all the songs that you mentioned. I mean, just incredible. And the energy on throughout the whole album, which is under 40 minutes, it's like over before you know it. But yeah, Naima, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, is definitely gorgeous, and I believe named after his wife at the time. So there was a lot of heart and soul behind that. And I also wanted to mention too that there were a couple members from Kind of Blue, from Miles Davis's team, that played on this. Paul Chambers on bass, and Jimmy Cobb played drums on this as well. And I think Tommy Flanagan was from that team. I mean, it was a close circle of these amazing players, all from that New York area. But man, Coltrane just unbelievable, and I agree should be higher on the list.
And honestly, I think that this is even better than a Love Supreme. I know a lot of people
Yeah,
don't feel that way, but I feel like this one is, you know, as revelatory as it is and as groundbreaking as I still feel is very accessible.
yeah,
Where you
much
know,
more accessible than Love Supreme, in
yeah,
my
which is
opinion.
not a knock necessarily at that record because that's another fantastic
Sure.
entry in Coltrane's discography. But I really think that this is his best album, and really just an absolute jazz classic. You know,
Man, and only at number 50. Crazy.
only at number 50, and that brings us to number 49. Something Else by the Kinks, by the Kinks. It says it right in the title. The third entry already of the Kinks on this list.
Go
And
Kinks.
man, this one, I think this one should be even higher, but I will take it being at number 49 here. I think this is really when Ray Davies, it was evident that he is one of the greatest songwriters of all time. The sarcasm is kicked up a notch. The introspection flourishes even more so, and really just has some of the most interesting song structures and you know instrumentation. Like this is the definition of Baroque pop. And you know with the harpsichords, the
Yeah.
melody. I
And
mean
didn't he end up
everything about it.
producing this album also? I
I
think.
think that this was actually yes, he produced this with Shel Tammy, but I think after this is when especially when it went on to Village Green, like he started self-producing it.
Mhm.
So this was really the step forward in their discography and career, and just starting off this album with David Watts, which I think is one of the funniest Kinks songs, talking about this very like you know well adored guy in high school who's secretly closeted because he was actually I guess this song was written about a guy. I believe his name might have even been David Watts, who was hitting on Dave Davies back in the day. And you have so many brilliant lines like where all the girls in the neighborhood try to go out with David Watts. But you know, he's a pure and noble breed. It's
Right,
just
right.
absolutely hysterical. And then you have the Dave Davies classic Death of a Clown, which is so, you know, la 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 la, you know, like that
Yeah.
bridge that Ray helped him bring together. I think maybe Dave's best contribution to the band when it comes to songwriting. And really, I think Two Sisters is just absolutely brilliant. Just the metaphorical kind of connection between Ray and Dave and how he sees him as like this kind of free spirit and how Dave is or how Ray is kind of like you know downtrodden, kind of like I guess put into this married life, and just the way how he's like sees you know her being so free, but then Priscilla and the I think I'm probably butchering the name, but just
Mm.
how she sees her children, and then she's like, you know what, my life is great too. This is something, yeah, and it's just such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song, and just some of the most brilliant songwriting. We also have Harry Rag, which is really a hoot. Situation Vacant, which is about this guy who's trying to, you know, stay, you know, true to this girl and try to get on her mother's good side, and it ends up going pretty horribly, to say the least. And of course, Lazy Old Son sounds like it's something off of Revolver.
That's one of
Really
my
something off
favorites
of
on here. Yeah.
it really is such an underrated Kinks track, and just it feels like so psychedelic, like it almost predates a Magical Mystery Tour, I believe. I could be wrong on that. But really the song in Afternoon Tea is another character portrait, just flourishes. But really, Waterloo Sunset, the greatest song in the Kinks discography, one of the greatest songs of all time. So I guess so well loved that it actually ranked number 14 on this most recent Rolling Stone list, which I thought was crazy that they would have moved the Kinks up at all, because I thought they're kind of forgotten about. But really, I
Yeah.
mean, just one of the most beautiful song structures, and really one of the most beautiful melancholic songs about depression I've ever heard, and self-isolate. I mean, it is an absolute masterpiece.
Yeah, you know, it's
One of
interesting.
my
Like
favorites.
that song didn't hit me as much until just a couple years ago, I saw this movie. You've probably seen this movie, Juliet Naked is what it's
I have
called.
not
And
yet.
that's a really good movie, actually. Ethan Hawke is the lead role, and he ends up playing that acoustic for someone in the movie as like a, kind of little dramatic love scene. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember this song. And it made me revisit it with that much more compassion towards the song. And yeah, I think you're right. I don't know that I would say it's my favorite Kink song, but it definitely is the strongest on this album. This one was not on my list. I like Arthur a bit more, and I was trying to space out the Kinks a little bit more on my list overall, but I definitely see why you love it, man. Absolutely.
No, man. I mean, just thank you. But just that melody, man. Just as long as I gaze on
Yeah.
Waterloo sunset, I am in
In
paradise.
paradise.
Just
Yeah.
watching Terry and Julie, just him observing these people while he just kind of cowers away from everybody else. I mean, it is just
Yeah.
it's one of the most brilliant songs ever written. And I think really if this album had a little bit more cleaner production, this would be on the level of something like Rubber Soul. I think because the songwriting I think is even better here. I just think, the Kinks were so far ahead of so many people at a time. I mean, they were better than the Who, I think, at this period in their career. And I think that this
Mhm.
is real, like this would be in my top 15. I think this is absolutely brilliant. But I will
Yeah.
take it at number 49.
Absolutely.
So, and now on to number 48. Willie and the Poor Boys by Creedence Clearwater Revival. CCR made the list. And I mean, there was no doubt that they were going to. I mean, this is one of the most iconic 60 bands of all time. I mean, a lot of people know their songs, but don't even know like who John Fogerty is sometimes. But really one of the finest tunesmiths of his era, and really charting so many hits, almost akin to Lennon and McCartney. But really, I think that this is the best of their 60 albums. I'll say that right up front. I mean, just starting out with Down on the Corner, which might even be my favorite Creedence Clearwater Revival. So just that bass riff, that dun 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 dun. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody knows it, especially from Walgreens. But it's just such a classic song, and just such a catchy melody. Absolute all-time classic. But you also have some really great underrated track, like their cover of Hootie Ledbetter or Huddy Ledbetter. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But Cotton Fields, which I think is pretty great. And of course, I mean, you got to talk about Fortunate Son, which is incessantly used in so many Vietnam movies.
Right.
But really, it's one of the most, just that down, 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 down,
Iconic,
like
man.
one of
Yeah.
the most iconic guitar riffs of all time.
And
Everybody
people
knows
forget
it.
what a great guitar player Fogerty is,
Yeah.
and a vocalist. Like, no one sounds like this guy on vocals. Like, just he had like so much, just, and I wouldn't call it rasp. It was like it's almost like he was predated Kurt Cobain as far as like the yells he could let out, and just the passion behind it. But on guitar, man, he was really incredible. And I also wanted to mention their cover of Midnight Special is fantastic.
Sure.
My favorite version of that song as well.
No, I can't say that's a bad choice for that one. I also think Effigy is pretty great too. The only thing that brings this album down for me is like some of the extended passages on the instrumental side of things, and some of the songs that kind of slow it down. But really, I mean, just Down on the Corner and Fortunate Son alone, I mean, just that it ain't me, it ain't me, I ain't no fortunate one. It's just one of the best protest songs in politically charged songs, and people have used it out of context too.
Sure.
Makes no sense, but you might know what I'm talking about. But really, just an absolute classic album. I think I think maybe it could have been higher, but I think this is a good spot for it personally.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say too about Creedence, like, they were so prolific. I mean, this was, I believe, the third album released in the same year.
Yeah.
1969. That's insane. And all three of the albums were great. I mean, So that's really saying something. I was introduced to the band, with their Chronicle Greatest Hits record, which does have, most of the classics, but I think it's definitely worth going through their whole catalog because there's some true gems, in there. So
Oh yeah, their studio output was phenomenal, and I think people forget that because they remember the hits. But man,
yeah,
those hits were just stacked on these records, even more so on Cosmos Factory,
yeah.
which was obviously from the '70s. But yeah, really great choice, guys. This is just an absolute classic record. And now on to, I believe, number 47.
Chain, 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 chain.
Lady Soul by the Queen, Aretha Franklin. Yes, this is really, I think this is when Aretha really throws herself into the soul genre. I mean, it's just the grooves on here are so seductive, so killer. Just
Mhm.
makes you want to move your body. It's just so upbeat. There's not a weak track on this album. I only love about half these songs, but I really like every single song on this album, especially opening it up with Chain of Fools, which is an all-time Aretha classic. Chain, chain,
Oh
chain,
yeah. And just from that
chain of
opening
fools.
guitar, you're like, oh man, something cool is about to go down
Right.
even before the vocals come in.
And dude, talk
Awesome.
about the guitarists on this album. They got Eric Clapton and Bobby Womack, which
Yeah.
was blew my mind, especially when I heard Good to Me as I Am to You, which I think is one of her most mind-blowing songs from the vocal level. But just you hear
Yeah.
the Eric Clapton guitar tone, you know it's him. And
Mhm.
it was such a trip to like hear him on this record. I didn't expect it at all, but that's one of the standouts for me and really one of the most underrated songs in her catalog. But of course, you have great covers of the Impressions, People Get Ready, which I think Aretha kills. Obviously, she could sing the phone book and then some. I mean, the greatest vocalist of all time, I think, without question. And I think that's yet again another great example of her vocal prowess. But of course, you make me feel like a natural woman,
Oh
which I
man.
mean, Carole King releasing this on Tapestry. I mean, it was unfortunate because nothing can compare to this version here. Just and so what a beautiful sentiment too. I
Oh
just
yeah.
absolutely love this song. I mean, everybody knows it. It's a classic, but
Yeah.
also really great. I think the closer too here, Ain't No Way, with those beautiful backing vocals from her sister and Sissy Houston. There is just, and I think it was Carolyn Franklin singing the hoo hoo, going in the
Mm.
head voice up there, but really such a beautiful song. And I think that, even though not all these songs are written by her, I think you can definitely tell that the songwriting is definitely better
Oh
than
yeah.
some of her
And
previous work.
you make me feel like a natural woman, man. Like one of the greatest covers ever, right up there with her cover of Respect from Otis Redding,
Well,
It's,
interesting thing though, I just want to interject for a sec is
yeah.
it wasn't, I mean, Carole King was almost covering it on her own
Well,
album, even though she wrote
right.
it because
Right.
Aretha, originated it. But really, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just incredible.
And I don't know if you got to see, but I mean, Aretha, even towards the end, was still just incredible when she did, I believe Carole King was being inducted into the Kennedy Center, or being awarded that. And Aretha came out and sang that. And it was just like, man, chills, dude. One of the greatest performances ever on that stage. So, just, yeah, one of the greatest voices of all time, if not the
The
best, like you
greatest.
said. Yeah.
I don't think that there's any contest there, and I
Yeah.
still have to see that performance because I've heard so much. You're not the first person who's mentioned it to me,
Oh, yeah.
and I have sinned. I have not seen it, so.
Oh, yeah.
But
Check it out.
hopefully, yeah, dude. Hopefully that will change. And really, I think this is at a perfect spot. I think this is a classic soul album, as
Mhm.
classic as soul can get, and as classic as Aretha Franklin can get as well.
Yeah.
So, and that's number 47 for you. So on to number 46.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've
The Sounds of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, the second S&G album on the list thus far. And yeah, from 1966, absolute classic, just for the title track alone, The Sound of Silence. Or I think it was actually, the title went with plural and singular at two different times. But of course, this would go on to be on the Graduate soundtrack. And yeah, this is actually my favorite Simon and Garfunkel song of all time. So yeah, absolutely, just for that song alone. But then you've also got Kathy's song, which is a great Art Garfunkel classic. You've got Homeward Bound, which is another one of my personal favorites, just beautifully written. And the harmonies, of course, are just gorgeous. And then closing the album, I Am a Rock, kind of weird lyrically, but it's catchy as hell. You know, I am a rock, I am an island. Gotta love it, man. And I love the little guitar lead on that as well. Really fun. Um, a little uneven sometimes overall as far as the record goes, but for those songs that I mentioned alone, it deserves to be on the list, I think.
Well, I agree with you to some extent, and just I want to note that have not listened to the version with Homeward Bound, because the one I know is the U.S. listing, and that wasn't originally on the U.S. I think they put it on Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme,
Oh,
for
right,
their next
right.
album. But
These tricky guys, yeah.
they fooling. But this to me, honestly, when it comes to Simon and Garfunkel, I'm kind of shocked this one made the list, because yes, Sound of Silence is one of their absolute best songs and one of the best songs Paul Simon has ever written. But you have amazing songs like you mentioned, like Kathy's song. I also have to mention April Come She Will, which was
Yeah,
featured so beautifully in The Graduate. I think one of the most underrated ballads in their entire discography. But this is also just thrown in with so many pretentious songs where you got that, undergraduate Paul Simon writing, which is just so undercooked and so pretentious, especially on Richard Corey. I think is just
mm,
one of the most pretentious songs in their entire discography. Um, so many here that just really kind of rub me the wrong way. But then again, there's so many classics. So,
right.
but I'm going to spoil something, guys. I'm sorry. This is the highest ranked Simon Garfunkel album from the 60s on this list, even more so than Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme, which I absolutely love and think is
Yeah.
their best album from the 60s, and Bookends, which makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I'm sorry. I know a lot of people. I love Simon and Garfunkel. They're some of my favorite artists of all time, but I just don't understand why this record is the one to get all the praise, because I think they had two infinitely better records from the 60s.
Yeah.
And it's a good album. Don't get me wrong. I like this album, but I
It's
don't
all
think
about that title track, baby.
and really it's so interesting how they did, because it was on their debut album too, but
Right.
this was like more electrified one.
Yeah.
And they wanted to cash on the success. And what you were saying about the title switching, yeah, it's the Sound of Silence, and then they said Sounds of Silence kind of to sell this record and put it as the album title.
Right.
I think that I mean, but I will say, even though I don't think this should be on the list, as opposed to some other stuff, I really think that they only had 5 albums. There's not a bad album in their whole discography. They're all good, but this is one I'd put closer to the bottom.
Yeah.
But there's only 5, so
Yeah.
what can you really say?
Exactly. Well, yeah, spoiler, no more Simon and Garfunkel from here on out, but
Unfortunately,
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of neutral. I mean, I do love them, but I can take them in doses, honestly. So I'm good with that. And I think this is not a terrible position for it. Oh, although I can see why
oh,
you would say Bookends should be higher, uh, but yeah, it's all good.
but yeah, and now we're going on to number 45. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, the debut album from that, trio that we just named there. This is a really good album. I didn't have it on my list, but I certainly understand the appeal to it, especially the Sweet Judy Blue Eyes is such an incredible composition from Stephen Stills. I think one of the best songs he's ever written, and it's just so explorative. It's over 7 minutes long. But you want to continue on with it. It's such a brilliant song that he wrote to his I don't know if I think exit time Judy Collins, and another iconic folk singer in her own right. Just such a beautiful track. And then of course you have other really great songs on here, like Lady of the Island, by Graham Nash. He wrote that one. And really, maybe to me, I think maybe the best song in contention with Judy Blue Eyes is Helplessly Hoping, which I knew just the 3-part harmonies, the way they came together was unlike anything that really came before them. Because yeah, you had the Beatles doing 3-part harmonies, but it was the way David Crosby, Graham Nash, and Stephen Stills' voices blended together in such a beautiful way. This is a really good album, but I also think it's brought down by Marrakesh Express, which I don't think is a terrible song, but it's just hippie nonsense, and I just that it's just so weird.
I think Iggy Pop
said,
yeah.
You go on,
the worst song of all time or something. He called it. Yeah,
I wouldn't go that far, but I don't think it's that great either.
Right. That's funny, man, that we were going to say the same thing. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of CSN, honestly. But I had never listened to this whole album until a few days ago, and it was. I got through it, Judy Blue Eyes, I do got to say I enjoy, especially it's worth it to get to that ending, that do 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 do. I mean, it's just great. And Helplessly Hoping, obviously. Wooden Ships, I kind of dug as well. I kind of liked some of the stuff on side B more than side A overall, but yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just like you said, nobody sounded like them before or after necessarily, but I guess I'm just not a huge fan of that sound for whatever reason. Even though sometimes that 3-part harmony can sound beautiful, sometimes it's just, I don't know, man. I'm not a fan overall. So
interesting.
I get why some people love them, but yeah, doesn't really do it for me. So this is my thumbs down of this episode.
Oh man, I think you know what? I think it's better than some other albums. Just like I think it's better than the last one, if I'm being honest. But
okay,
I wouldn't put it on my list, but I completely understand why. It is a really good debut album, I think, and I think one that they even topped with when Neil Young joined and they did Deja Vu. But yeah. All right, on to number 44 on this list.
I've been loving you.
Otis Blue, Otis Redding sings soul. Yes, this to me is one of the best soul records, and I think the definitive album of Otis Redding's short-lived career, but a legendary career at that. Really, this I think cements him as the king of soul. I don't think anybody embodied soul more than he did, and Aretha obviously yes, but I think he was the one to really cement this genre and this style, and this album really did it. And yeah, there's a lot of covers on this, but the thing that was so great about Otis, and also great about, I would say about Aretha and Elvis Presley as well, were they were like the great interpreters. It was the way they took these songs and completely transformed them into their own beast. Which obviously you get quite a few spots on here, like his version of A Change Is Gonna Come, which we were talking about in the last episode, Sam Cooke's, the best version of it. But really here, it's so much different. It's like he's not so sure that there's a change going to come. He's like trying to convince himself that there is, and the way he plays with the lyrics, which is such a soul trademark, obviously. But he really makes the song his own, and it's one of the standouts on this record, a record full of standouts, especially Old Man Trouble opening this record. And you just hearing that Otis, that tone, that raspy, gritty tone, but one that was so, just so soulful. Really, he is the definition of soul, and I think that track is just such a great way to introduce us. And then you get an all-time classic, Respect, which was made even better by Aretha. But here, I mean, it's such a great song to begin with. You can't help but love this. And also, I mean, some great covers. Down in the Valley, I think, is amazing. It has a killer groove. It's that Down in the Valley. And him being backed by Booker T and the MGs. I mean, what an amazing backing band. It was Steve Cropper on guitar. You know, and I believe Donald Duck Dunn on bass at this point, and obviously Booker T. Jones.
Mhm.
Just a classic. And really this album, it's that stack sound, you know, those horns blaring that really defined what soul was as a genre. And yet again, so many great, you know, other Sam Cooke covers. I think Wonderful World, I think, might even be better than the Sam Cooke version, if you ask me. And his
Mhm.
amazing cover, I think, of Satisfaction by the Stones, which was written with Otis in mind. They wanted to write a Stax style Otis Redding song. So when he covered it, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger were really greatly honored. And of course, I mean, You Don't Miss Your Water is just such a beautiful way to close us out. You know, just the pain in his voice that he brings, the emotion. Really, he was another one who could just sing the phone book. But really,
Yeah.
I think the standout on here is I've Been Loving You Too Long, which I think is an absolute Otis Redding classic. And the subtle build in the chord inversions with those horns at the end, and just, I mean, really one
Yeah.
of the most iconic moments in music, really.
Yeah, that definitely I think is the standout as well, but really not a weak track on here whatsoever. Yeah, and it's really cool to see how the baton is passed among these great soul artists in the 60s. You know, change gonna come. We talked about on last episode being handed to him the next year, and then Respect from this album, which will be handed to Aretha. You know, it's just it's all in the family, man, and they're all amazing. But Otis, yeah, there was just something special about his voice. Even though me personally, I like Sam Cooke's voice better. I know you'll probably think
Well,
that's
fair.
insane,
That's fair. I get that for sure.
but I mean, just both of them incredible. And yeah, I've Been Loving You Too Long. I went back and listened to that track
Yes.
actually today, and that has grown on me significantly since you and I have last talked about it. And I see why it's like so highly regarded. Just that opening note of his voice, man, it's like it gets you right here. So
I've been loving you. I mean,
yeah,
it's just so incredible. And
yeah.
man, really, it's just you can feel the emotion. That's the best part
Mhm.
about all of this. He puts his soul 100% into this. And I
Absolutely.
will say the a cover of My Girl is a little tepid. I don't it doesn't stray too far from the Temptations version for me to really love it. And I think
Right.
the Rock Me Baby, the BB King cover, doesn't play off quite as well, or Shake, which is another Cook one. But you know, there's, as you said, there's not a bad song on here, and I think these are some of the best interpretations of these songs, and just some of his best own compositions in general. So great pick, guys. I think it should be a little higher, at least in the top 30. But you know, I'm just really glad that Otis Redding is on this list at the very least. He's one of my favorites, and one of the best from the 60s for sure. Just absolutely tragic what happened to him. Only 26 years old. I can't imagine what he would have went on to do, but what he did achieve in such a short time, just like Buddy Holly, was so monumental and really one of the most influential artists of all time. So that brings us now to number 43.
Green River by Creedence Clearwater Revival, the second CCR album to make the list. And yeah, I think this is perfectly placed. Actually, I think on my list I did have this a bit higher than Willie and the Poor Boys, but yet another album that they released in 1969, and
Nuts.
a great one, man. I mean, the title track alone, just that opening riff. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. I mean, it just has that swampy, bluesy, New Orleansy feel that these Californian dudes brought to it. It's just, it makes no sense, but it's brilliant. And then Commotion being one of their hardest rockers of their whole catalog. I just love how you know, the electric guitar is just like, you can feel the amp sizzling on that one. It's so cool. Then of course you got Bad Moon Rising, one of their absolute classics. You know, that boom, 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 boom. There's just three chords to the whole thing, but one of the most fun songs about like the world coming to an end. You know, up there with REM's "It's the End of the World as We Know It," and it was used perfectly in the film An American Werewolf in London, by the
Wolf of
way.
London, yes.
So great. And then you got Lodi, a really great ballad. Oh Lord, stuck in Lodi again. Oh God, I absolutely love it. So yeah, great pick, guys.
Yeah, this album, I would put it a little bit lower, but it was on my list. This is,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think it's better than Willie and the Poor Boys, as I said, but this is a classic album, and just for the title track alone is just so fantastic. I really do love Tombstone Shadow as well. That one
Mm,
really grew on me a lot. But
yeah.
really, there's underrated tracks on here like Wrote a Song for Everyone, which
Mhm.
has such a beauty that wrote a song for everyone, and
Yeah.
wrote a song of truth, but I couldn't even talk to you. I mean, such a great and underrated track. Um, but really, I think the standouts here are definitely Lodi,
Mhm.
which is something I'll just put on repeat, just because it's such a brilliant song and really one of their most melodic, which is saying a lot if we're talking about Creedence Clearwater Revival. But Bad
Yeah.
Moon Rising is tied for me with Down on the Corner. It could go either way. It's just I've heard it so many times, but it gets me pumped every time. And just as you said, just the thing, it sounds like they crawled out of the swamp, but yet they're from like San Verito or wherever. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but really these guys, such a tight band, and really this was, I think, their first great album of just quite a few, and really it was such a great run for them too.
Yeah. Yeah. You would think they were born on the bayou, as one of
Yeah,
their songs says. It's crazy. But yeah, love them and so glad they're on the list twice, man. Awesome.
absolutely. And now that brings us to number 42.
I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half past.
Music from Big Pink by the band. Absolutely deserves to be on the list, just for the song The Weight alone. I mean, one of the absolute classics of the 60s or of any decade for that matter. I just, Robbie Robertson's songwriting mixed with Levon Helm's amazing vocals. No one sounds like that guy, and he really sells the song. And it's one of those that you just want to sing along and do that little three-part harmony that he and Danko and the guys do. You put the load right on me. So great. Of course, you got I Shall Be Released, another one of their most well-known covers in this case of Bob Dylan, who they were hanging out with at the Pink House up there in upstate New York in those times. And it must have been just an amazing song. I can only imagine to jam with their hero, that they were actually the supporting band on his 1966 tour and beyond. And that's why they were called the band. They were Dylan's band, but went out on their own here. And there's definitely some great stuff. For me personally, The Last Waltz is where it's at. You get kind of like a greatest hits live version of some of these songs that are even better than the studio versions. But there's absolutely some great stuff on here. Tears of Rage, Long Black Veil, The Weight, I Shall Be Released. Really not a weak track, honestly.
Sure. And I'm not the biggest fan of the band. I still have to see The Last Waltz, which I hear is amazing. But yeah, this is a really, really good debut album. Very, very strong effort from this group. And I think, so far from what I've heard, their best album. But really, I mean, I think I Shall Be Released is even better than the Dylan version that was released later. I just think, and just, Richard Manuel on vocals there absolutely kills it. But of course, yeah, I mean, Long Black Veil is yet again another song that they really make their own, and it sounds like only them could have done it. And obviously, Johnny Cash has a great version on at Folsom Prison, but
Right.
that to me is just such a classic on here. But Tears of Rage is a really good one, really good lyrics. Not my favorite, but I like it a lot. But obviously, The Weight is the standout on here. I mean,
Right.
going down to Nazareth, everybody
Yeah.
knows it. And just that chorus, I knew that before I even knew the band. And really just so crazy that this came out of the Blonde on Blonde sessions, like this backing band called the Hawks at the time, I believe, and
Right.
went on to form the band, and really just, as you said, went out and got the spotlight and really proved their own accords and really just proved themselves to be one of the most popular bands and really influential in country rock. I mean, or I guess contemporary country, just to
Yeah.
begin with. So influential. And so as much as I probably wouldn't have put this on the list, I completely understand why it is here. You
Right.
had to represent the band on here, and yeah, this is a good choice.
Yeah, I could have gone either way. I think it's just nice that they're represented on the list overall, because the self-titled the band album is probably close to equal to this one, honestly. But yeah, to have the weight alone, it's worth it. And again, another one of these groups, kind of like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and Crosby, Stills and Nash, where you have these three different vocalists that are completely different, but they come together to form something magical. Levon, Rick Danko, and Richard Manuel, and the songwriting of Robertson is just top notch, man.
It's a good combo, I must say. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have it above Otis or Credence or Aretha, but I mean, that's democracy for you, I guess. But it is still a very iconic album. So that leads us to number 41. In a Silent Way by Miles Davis. This is an interesting one, and I think first off, it's interesting because it was his first fusion record, fusing electric instruments in jazz, which a lot of jazz purists said at the time was just really blasphemous. But obviously, you saw what he did later on in his career, especially on Bitches Brew, and so I think it's noteworthy in that sense. There's two songs on here. Being peaceful and in a silent way. It's about time. And I think this is quite a good record. It has some really great guitar playing on there. And really Miles, obviously, on trumpet is never a bad thing. I think this album is overrated, though. And I don't think it should be on the list. I mean, especially above Giant Steps. Like, come on, really? Like, I don't
I
get
agree.
that. I'm sorry, I and especially above all the picks in this episode, besides maybe Sounds of Silence, which I would put it on the same level as, but even that has like some really classic tracks.
Yeah.
I just, it's a good album. Don't think I'm like knocking it 100%, but I just don't think it's a great one.
I agree totally. I think a lot of jazz enthusiasts, probably see this as a groundbreaking album, which, as you said, it totally was, like one of the first jazz fusion where you're mixing a little bit of rock, even though I would say the title is almost perfect for it, because to me, it's like overall it's more of a subdued album than his earlier stuff. And it's definitely interesting and has some compelling moments, especially like you said, the electric guitar of John McLaughlin. And also interesting, you have Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea playing electric piano on here. But overall, it's just there's not really. Yeah, like you said, Giant Steps should definitely be higher than this. It's for sure. And Bitches Brew, of course, is in the next decade, but would have been leaps and bounds more interesting than this record. I think this is just more of a introduction of what was to come. And I guess a lot of people give it a lot of props for that. But to me, it didn't really do it for me that much.
Yeah, it's good. It's very, solid, but it's not better than Giant Steps, guys. Sorry to break it to you. Sorry to end this episode out on I guess a whipper from our side. But I mean, that's
all
how it
uphill
goes
from here, man.
Right. That's what I like to say. I don't think that there are too many records on here, but that's the thing. There's not an album I dislike on this list. There's not one where I'm like, this should not be okay. Maybe I've said that about Wheels of Fire, but
right. Yeah.
there's all, and I enjoy that album, but
Yeah, the same.
No.
Like with Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Like
Right.
even though I said thumbs down, I think I gave it a 6 out of 10. So
Yeah.
like it was still enjoyable overall. I wouldn't knock it, for what it is, but obviously wasn't on my list. And there's other things I love more. But as you said, this is a democracy. That's the beauty of it. And hopefully you guys are seeing albums that you love along the way. And, let us know in the comments below what you think. What do you think's coming next? Did you vote for that's made it thus far in this episode? And yeah, can't wait to see where we go from here.
Yeah, as you said, things are only looking up from this point onwards, and I can't wait to get into it. So if you haven't already, obviously smash that like button if you like what you're seeing here, and obviously subscribe to Johnny Radio, guys. I mean, you got to continue on with this series if you're here already, and his channel is so great in his own way. I mean, it's just phenomenal that we're even doing this together. So thank you once again for bringing up this collaboration, and thank you guys for tuning in. So until then, we'll see you in the next episode.
See you guys.